Thank you so much. And I'm here with Shaun, who is actually known to Borough Hall. He holds a financial literacy seminar here to teach Brooklynites how to manage their finance, first-time home buyers. He holds the seminars here for free. He's well known in the Brooklyn area as a businessman and as giving back his time to help people overcome a financial crisis. So he's known to this office. He has utilized this space before to help Brooklynites in a very real way. He gives back. This is not a stranger to this office, and I'm here with Roger Archibald, an attorney that's well known in the area, civil rights attorney, who is representing Shaun as well. There's a few issues that are alarming to me, and Shaun will go into what happened on JetBlue Airlines, but what's alarming to me is that we seem to have this belief that no matter what encounter you have with a black man, call the cops. That is the only resolution to be returning home from a Thanksgiving event to visit his family and to ask a question. It escalates to a criminal action. The only way you can resolve a conflict with the black man is that you immediately call the police. I cannot imagine how angry I would have been if I'm on an airline attempting to return to my family back in the city, and I'm removed not because I committed a terrorist action, not because I did something that was violent, not because in any way I raised my voice, but I just engaged in a conversation, and to be removed off a plane because of that is just really strikes at the problem of what we're seeing on the airlines, and we need to do a real analysis of how often this takes place and how are we resolving these issues. The resolution cannot be a police escort a person off merely before raising a question. And when I saw parts of the video and I knew the person, and I know his demeanor, very soft-spoken. This is an intelligent man of color or non-color. This is a very intelligent businessman in our city and in our borough that has given back. And for him to have went through that experience, and the people who were around him clearly indicating this man did nothing wrong, and he was treated in this fashion. That's disturbing and it's alarming, and we've all seen the videos of people being carried off, dragged along the aisles, just the interaction. When will the airlines get it right? That this is not how you treat passengers specifically, but it appears to me that Shaun was treated differently, and we just seem to have this image of this tall black man with locks, so we need to immediately call the police. That is wrong, and that is the only thing I can see based on what I saw in this video happen in this encounter. Thanksgiving should not turn into a misgiving by an airline that is frequent by passengers of color that fly to Florida, that flies to the Caribbean. Their patronage is a large part of the communities of color. And we're going to personally reach out to JetBlue. We've interacted with JetBlue a number of times before. We're going to speak with them and sit down with them. But in addition to that, I'm sure there's going to be actions based on Shaun's attorney. So I want to turn it over to Shaun. He could share what happened on the airlines, and then we would turn it over to his attorney. Shaun?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thursday, November 28th, I was boarding JetBlue flight 1562 from Barbados to JFK. I went to my seat, which was 18C. I sat down. I noticed two young individuals sitting beside me, middle and aisle seat. I saw their parents going up and down the aisle. They had a lot of carry-on luggage, and they were frustrated that their carry-on luggage could not be above them where they're sitting. So They were panting up and down the aisle. A particular flight attendant started helping them put their luggage away. They eventually came back. The father took the son sitting in the middle seat, brought him over to his wife, which was sitting directly across, and placed him in the window, and his wife was sitting in the middle seat, and he sat in the middle seat beside me, and the other son sat by the window. I sat, nothing was said. A couple minutes later, a particular flight attendant came to them and said, we're moving you guys up to extra leg seating. Everybody around me was kind of shocked because they were the ones slowing down the flight. They were the ones that were kind of they were the ones kind of not being able to settle down in a timely manner, and we were all looking at why were they being rewarded. So I simply asked the question, why did you move them up front? The flight attendant looked at me and snapped at me and said, it's none of your business. I sat back down. I was always sitting. A JetBlue employee, he works the ground crew. He's the kind of the person that helps people on the flight and then disembarks once the flight leaves. Saw what happened, came to me and said, sir, would you like to sit up front in extra leg seating? And I said, of course I would. I stood up. People around me clapped for what he did, applauded him for what he did. I went and sat in 1C. Within a couple minutes later, the original flight attendant saw what happened and said, why is he sitting here? Put him back to his seat. He can't be sitting here. He shouldn't be sitting here. Move him back to his seat. I saw him trying to explain to her that I put him here, and I told him to sit here. She said, just let him go back to his seat. He's not sitting here. Then another flight attendant got involved. At that point, I stood up, and I tried to interject. They cut me off, and I said, well, I'm going to let you speak as long as I can I speak after you finish speaking? He said what he had to say, and then I said, can I now speak? He said, no. And I said, can I speak to the captain? The captain does not want to speak to you. Then a security-like guy that works for JetBlue came to me and asked if he can speak to me off the plane. He pulled me aside. He said, either you go back to your seat or police are going to come and escort you off the plane. So I put my pride aside, put my head down, and I walked back to my original seat of 18C. I sat down for a couple minutes, and then I noticed that the original flight attendant was walking towards me. In my head, I thought she was coming to apologize and even move me back up front. She sat down, she went down on one knee, kneeled on one knee, started patting me on my leg, and said, are you going to behave yourself? I said to her, why would you ask me that question? I said, I'm an educated man. Why would I not behave? At that point, she looked, she got up, and she went to the front, said what she said to the captain. A few minutes later, security told me that I have to get off the plane. I'm being removed from the flight. I asked why. They said, you please get your stuff, you're going to be removed from the flight. The passenger saw what was going on. At that point is when I really started recording, because I wanted to see people to see the reaction of the passengers and see that they were there to witness what happened. They took to my offense. The African-American flight attendant, Diane Brathwaite, she heard the passengers and was in agreement with them so much that she went to the captain herself and spoke to the captain. I wasn't there to see what was said, but my opinion, she was saying, to keep me on the flight. As I was walking down the aisle now, she's walking towards me, and she said, quote unquote, I'm sorry I tried. At that point, the police officers were waiting for me at the front of the plane, one to the left, one to the right. They took me off the plane. I felt like I was in custody. I had to walk through the airport, see passengers, even see fellow people that I know from Barbados looking at me like, what just happened? I was brought back to immigration. I was then questioned there as to my actions, as to what I did. There was 3 immigration officers, 2 police officers, and then somebody just casually dressed and just asked me where I live, what I'm from, what I do, what happened. As I explained to them what happened, they said that was it, and I said, yes, that's it. I asked one question, why did you move them up front? And I was removed from the flight. At that point, they wrote down the information. I went to the luggage area, had to collect my luggage, still in custody with the police, one to the left, one to the right, walked through the airport, through immigration, led outside, and then finally the police let me go. At that point, I contacted JetBlue. I explained to them what had happened, and they didn't really say much. Then I decided to post it onto their website, and I got a response, let me know your confirmation number and your name, which I did, and they responded to me kind of abruptly, well, at least they were able to change you and put you on another flight the next day. To my surprise, I was put on another flight for the next day, and the actual seat that they seated me in was the seat that they kicked me out of. Yeah, 1D to be exact. When I got to the airport the next day, the manager, the ground manager at JetBlue was very apologetic for what happened. She confirmed with her ground staff as to what would happen. They didn't understand why I was removed from the flight. I boarded the flight, came back to New York the next day, and I decided to make sure that, to really prevent something like this from happening, because I just think it's unfair, and I don't think I should be removed from a flight for just asking a question. So I wanted the public to know so that people can understand things that happen and things that need to be corrected. And so far, the response has been great. Someone even went as far as to start a petition out there where people are giving their comments, and you're hearing different stories of different mistreatments and things that JetBlue and other airlines need to correct.
Shaun, what do you want to see happen?
Let me introduce myself. Good afternoon. My name is Roger Archibald, and I represent Shaun Lynda. The question was, what does Shaun want to see happen? And I think at the very least, he'd like to see JetBlue and all airlines obey the law. And the law is pretty straightforward and clear on the treatment of passengers who are flying. The laws have been in existence for quite some time in terms of discrimination. An airline cannot take any action against any passenger if that action has a basis in the race, the creed, or the national origin of that passenger. And if there's a question as to whether or not it does touch on any of those prescribed areas, then an act of discrimination happened, and the law provides for compensation, whether it be punitive or compensatory, and airlines routinely are made to pay for doing those types of things. Now, the Department of Transportation, a U.S. administrative agency, is in charge of administering the statutes, or rather enforcing the statutes as it relates to airline passengers. Now, we did some research into JetBlue, and some alarming things are in their past. For example, back in 2012, they were fined $90,000 because they kept passengers in the airport at a gate for over 3 hours. Under the Passenger's Bill of Rights, that is not permissible. 3 minutes, you're supposed to alert the passengers to the fact that they can disembark if they want to, and if they want water, if they want to use the facilities, you have to let them. They didn't, and they were fined. Again, back in 2009, JetBlue paid over $240,000 to a passenger. This was someone of Arabic descent. His name was Riyad Jarrah. He was wearing a T-shirt with an Arabic inscription that said, "We'll never be silent." They told him, take the shirt off, cover it up, or you can't fly. He wanted to fly from New York to Orlando, so they gave him a shirt to cover that shirt up, and they put him in the back of the airline. And for that, JetBlue paid him $240,000, admitting their liability. That is impermissible. And we intend to speak to JetBlue. We have already filed a complaint with the Department of Transportation. They would be investigating it. But beyond this, it's just not about Shaun Lynda. This is about the flying public, and not just people of African ancestry, but all people. All people have a right to fly free of discrimination. It is our view that what happened was actuated by racial discrimination. And when all the facts are in, I think someone will be making the decision as to the way forward in terms of how JetBlue deals with its passengers. What they did, in our view, was inappropriate and violative of the law.
Mr. Archibald.
Did I do anything wrong? Did I do anything wrong?
No, you did not do anything.
Why did I get kicked off of JetBlue?
Nobody knows.
Was I loud? Was I rude in any way? Did I do anything wrong?
No, just ask one simple question.
Did I do anything wrong?
That's the family?
Sorry, I didn't see it.
And then the legs, you show the leg of
No, with the slippers? No, that wasn't the family. No. They had a European accent, to be honest. Nothing.
You can see the rest of us on Facebook.
Nothing. The man showed me to move forward to the front.
No, you can see the rest of us on Facebook. It's just to explain you did
This
nothing.
girl came down. It was a setup. She kneeled down.
Okay, gentlemen, JetBlue issued a statement to WABC TV. I'd like to read that to you and get your respective reaction, please. I'm going to read it to it in its entirety so that you have the benefit to respond to all of it. It says, "We take any claim of discrimination seriously. The decision to remove a customer from a flight is not made lightly and would never be related to a customer's ethnicity or race. Shortly before takeoff, a crew member was reseating a family so the mother could sit next to her children as their seat assignments had them sitting apart. Because the only seats available were in a row with extra legroom, the crew offered the mother and her children those seats, consistent with JetBlue's policy to make every effort to seat families together. Another customer asked the crew why the extra legroom seats were offered to the family and demanded an extra legroom seat as well. After the customer declined to pay for an upgraded seat assignment, he was asked to return to his originally assigned seat. The customer became angry and used inappropriate language with crew members, and as the situation risked further escalation in air after takeoff, the crew determined the customer would need to be rebooked on a different flight. As New York City's hometown airline, diversity is in our DNA, and we celebrate the many cultural backgrounds of our crew members and customers." Mr. Borough President,
Yes.
chime in first.
I think that clearly, and I thought it was so important that Shaun spanned the passages and said, did I do anything wrong? And several of them said, you simply asked a question. And then when you look at the Will I Am scenario on Qantas, a rapper had on headphones, he didn't hear the announcement, the police was called. I think that it's easy to spin, and I fly often. I just returned from Senegal 2 weeks ago. You have conversations with stewardess and airline employees, you raise questions. How do you handle those questions? I saw the demeanor based on the after effect. I didn't see a person who was irritated. I didn't see a person who was angry. I saw a person merely asking, what did I do wrong? Did I do anything wrong? How it escalated based on what was articulated in that statement was clearly trying to spin that a person was removed off the plane with a police escort for asking a question. If a person was disruptive, I think that an airline must do everything possible to ensure that they keep the safety of the employees and the staff. That is not what we saw here. And we want to sit down, the Borough President's office want to sit down with JetBlue and speak with them directly on what happened here, because I believe it was inappropriate.
I really want to get your take on that because,
I just want to address the moving of the family. So I have 2 sons of myself, and I have been moved to 3 seats so my 2 kids and I can sit comfortably together. But this was a family of 4. And originally, there was the 2 kids sitting together, and the father and the mother took it upon themselves to set a seating arrangement that would work with the family. The father sat beside one son, the mother sat beside another son, directly across from each other. So when I asked the question, the reason why I asked the question, because I couldn't understand what better seating arrangement could you give them based on a family of 4. You could not make a better case scenario than the scenario that they created for themselves, which was 2 here and 2 there. And the family never requested to be moved up front. They never asked. They were just randomly picked. And that's what had the people around us questioning as to why, because you couldn't create a better seating arrangement for that family. And that's why the question was asked.
Did they ask you to pay for an upgraded seat
Absolutely not. The witness will show, I was just sitting there and the gentleman saw what happened and asked me, would I like to sit up front as well? And that's when the crowd applauded for his actions.
So let me be clear, you were originally in 1D,
I was originally in 18C.
and then when you're in 18C, because of your height, a crew member just recommended that you come up to the front?
Because of what transpired, that the other family was moved forward, he then said, would you like to move up front as well? And I agreed. There was never any talk of fee, transaction, cost, me not paying, or anything of that nature.
How did you feel about this woman touching your leg?
I felt like it was an invasion of my space. I felt like I was belittled. I felt like I was patted like a dog. And I just felt like, you know, how dare she do something? What if it was the opposite? What if I was a flight attendant and I patted her on her leg? How would that look? And to go further, the next day I was seated in 1D on the flight returning. I didn't pay for an upgrade. I didn't ask for an upgrade. I just saw that was my appropriate seat.
Are you offended by this statement?
Absolutely.
What else do you think is false about what they said?
Angry. I was not shouting. I do not use profanity, so I wasn't cursing in any way. I asked a question. From that question, it just snowballed into other events from me being moved up front.
Now, the flight attendant is of African American descent as well, no?
No, I think she is more of a Latin, Hispanic.
Do you think if you were a white male specifically, you would have been treated differently?
It's an assumption, but being a black man my entire life and seeing the things that I've gone through, it's a possibility.
What do you think needs to happen to this flight attendant?
She should be reprimanded, as well as the pilot, because many times I asked for the pilot to come out, he didn't come out. The pilot formed an opinion by staying in his cockpit. The flight attendant, Diane Brathwaite, went to his pilot, spoke to him. I assume she said he did nothing wrong. I wasn't there to hear the conversation. He still took the words of the one flight attendant, and I said to him, as I was leaving with the police officers there, I was actually happy that they were bringing the police, because I said, you know, don't ask me, ask the passengers what happened. You don't have to ask me, just ask them what happened.
Let me interject for one moment. That's very important. If you saw the cockpit, the door was open, small plane, not a 747 wide body, small plane. If we had a passenger that was loud, that was cursing, that was abusive, why did our captain stay in the cockpit? Why didn't he step outside to investigate a disorderly passenger on his plane? Why didn't they take more appropriate actions? So I see malfeasance on his part if they stated that he was loud, he was boisterous, he was cursing. Second, ask JetBlue if it was about ensuring that people pay for the upgrade. Were the 4 passengers that they put up front, did they pay for that upgrade also? Or were you only charging an upgrade to just a certain passenger and not another? So there's inconsistency in their story. In policing, we call that a lie.
Okay, gentlemen, also, you know, could there be potentially legally 2 issues here? Not only the bias that you're alleging, but also the fact that she touched him? Like, is that even appropriate?
Absolutely. We are exploring and investigating all legal measures in terms of fashioning whatever lawsuits, if any, we are going to file. We have just started the initial phase by filing a complaint with the Department of Transportation, but beyond that, there could be court intervention.
But nothing on that front has happened officially yet.
In regards to court intervention,
Right, filing a lawsuit.
no, that hasn't happened yet, but it's under advisement. We are exploring all the options.
And Mr. Borough President, in your infinite experience as a police officer and an attorney and now Borough President, you know, to me, you know, it elevates and escalates the situation when there's human contact. Can you address that, please?
Yes, not an attorney, but as Shaun stated, he's right. If he would have placed his hands on the airline stewardess, that would be a level of inappropriate behavior, and she should have never touched him. She should have never placed her hands on him, no matter how passive it may have been, and I'm sure that violates her rules. And all of those passengers who were there in the area, that's why it was so important what Shaun did, of asking, did I do anything wrong? And if anyone is on an airline, you know passengers don't like being delayed, and he scanned the passengers that were there, and they clearly indicated that he didn't do anything wrong. No one said you were cursing, you were loud, you were inappropriate, but it really creates the image of this angry, tall, locks-wearing black man. And people say, you know what, Eric, don't be trying to play the race card. That's the only card in my hand. And just as what happened to will.i.am, and just as what I see often on the airlines, you know, I see people upset when I sit in business class. They want to check my ticket 3 or 4 times. These are the subtle racism that we experience, and we just flow with it. But to be thrown off the plane is something that I'm amazed how calm he was. I would not have been that calm. We would have had a problem. He handled himself well. He was disciplined. He understood how easy it was to go from having a dispute to being arrested. I commend you for what you did. I'm not as good as you. We would have had a problem on JetBlue.
Have you, Rich, you said you have you heard from anybody, Mr. Borough President, at this point?
We received a call from a representative, and we're going to immediately reach out to them in the next day or so, if not later on today. We think this was inappropriate, and we're going to find out exactly what happened here. And I'm going to ask some of those questions based on their comments. You know, sometimes we put our spins without realizing that there are those of us that have conducted investigations in our lives, and we can see the dualities in the conversations that people make. There's a problem in their statement. The captain did not do his job based on their statement.
As you're retelling the story and watching this video and all of this is going through your mind again, what's something that you find really upsetting and unfair about it? What is a week later? What is bothering you about this now?
Before I just heard this young lady's statement, or after, or prior to that?
The statement.
Yeah, that's the first statement I've heard from JetBlue, and it's just saddened that they're not taking responsibility and accountability for what's happened. And I'm happy that I did take the video, because I'll say it once again, you don't need to question me, you don't need to question JetBlue, you just need to question the passengers that were on that flight to see exactly what happened.
Do you want the flight attendants to be retrained in some way?
Yeah, part of the initiative, you know, and you know, I'm always about active change, and you know, to me, it's a policy change. It's retraining, it's understanding, and you know, JetBlue flies, you know, we potentially say throughout the world, and they have to understand when they're going to certain communities, certain groups, that they have to understand their audience and who they're dealing with, and to me, to get more involved in the community and have a better understanding of the customer.
Would you have expected a lot more sensitivity from a brown person? You said she may have been of Latin descent. Would you have expected, or do you just think, you know, as a black man, you're always profiled in that manner?
I'm 6'3" with dreadlocks. I'm profiled quite often, yeah. And you know,
What do you think would have been the proper course of action from the very beginning that might have avoided all this? And where along the way, how many times did they stray from what you think they should have done?
you know, despite her personal feelings of me being moved to the front, once another employee permitted me to do so, or were asked of me to do so, she should have just allowed it, and you know, allow me to sit there. Or even if it went that far and I went back to my seat, she didn't. She was not the lead flight attendant on that flight. Maybe the lead or somebody else could have come and spoken to me and asked me a question, and we could have just moved forward. Because I was already sitting. When she came to me, she had to bend down because I was sitting. I was ready to fly, to come back home for Thanksgiving.
Do you find it's an abuse of power on her part?
Absolutely, and I felt vulnerable. I felt like I could say nothing. I wasn't allowed to do anything. I had zero control of whatever was to happen.
You said you were on your way home for things. You had been on vacation.
Well, I was in Barbados, correct. I was flying Barbados back to JFK.
And your goal was to be home for Thanksgiving dinner.
Absolutely.
And you missed it.
Yes.
Did you incur any additional expense?
Of course, I had to overnight in Barbados, so yes.
What was that expense?
I had to get a taxi, a driver to bring me back to where I was going. I stayed by friends and family, but then I had to get back to the airport the next day. My car was left somewhere where I had to incur extra fees. And, you know, I had to call my kids and tell them, I'm not going to make it this year. And to me, Thanksgiving is a very important holiday.
Are you from Barbados?
I was born in Canada. My family's from
So
Barbados.
you were visiting family and then.
Yeah, correct.
So you didn't spend Thanksgiving with your children because of this incident?
Correct.
When was the next one?
The next day.
And you know, I just think it's so important because people just really just really don't get this. For the rest of his life, whenever he goes on a plane, he's going to relive this. Whenever his children talk about Thanksgiving 2019, they're going to say Dad wasn't here because Dad was escorted off by 2 cops. This is the narrative. And I know, some people may say, oh, you just had a bad day on the airline. No, this is the narrative. This is the narrative of what we are fighting against. And it's difficult if you have never experienced this. When you walk on a plane, if you are a European descent, you walk on a plane, you know you're going to get your seat and you're going to get upgraded if needed. People are going to accommodate you. But when you go in and you don't fit the stereotype of why are you flying in the first place? And I see it often. I fly all the time. And the way you're treated differently as a passenger is one thing. And you sit down and you relax. But when you are escorted off by 2 cops for not committing a crime, what are we saying? Not arguing, not fighting. We're just going to escort you off as a cop, as 2 cops. So what, you're a businessman? So what, you're disciplined? So what to all of that? So what, you a rapper? We're going to call the cops on you. That's what happened to him.
Yeah, if I was what they said I was, would I be rewarded the next day with an upgrade in my seat? Would they have rewarded me? They may not even allow me to go on the flight, any JetBlue flight.
How could you stay so calm?
It's my demeanor. Any slight of aggression, I'm by my stature, and it could lead to imprisonment. So you condition yourself to remain calm. I don't have that luxury of being able to be aggressive and loud, because it creates a profile, and I look as being aggressive and intimidating. So,
Imprisonment or jail.
exactly.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Release that video to the